Good morning to all of you. I am Dr. D.D. Sawant from Department of Geography. In the institution which I am working, that is a J.A.T Arts, Science and Commerce College for Women, Malegaon District, Nashik. Today's topic which I had taken, that is a Biosphere reserves. What are they for? If you will see the program of Biosphere, reserve is within the ambit of Man and Biosphere program. In short, it is called as a MAB for the UNESCO. The concept of biosphere reserves refer to the protection and conservation of natural habitats and plants and animal species, therein with three major goals. For example, those are: number one is a conservation of biological diversity. Second one, that is a setting up a well-defined and identified international network of areas for field research and monitoring programs and activities, including training and information exchange in accordance with MAB program, which is in logistic role. Third one is that to associate concretely environmental protection and land resources with development means the development role. So as a sustainable use, living laboratories for sustainable development, what different about them are social, cultural, spiritual and economic. So the concept of biosphere reserves has its root in the Conference on the Rational Use and Conservation of the Resources of the Biosphere, organized by MAB in 1968, wherein one of the recommendations was related to the utilization and preservation of genetic resources. The recommendations of the said conference proposed to make specific efforts to preserve representative samples of significant ecosystem, original habitats of domesticated plants and animals, and remnant populations of rare and endangered species, and for the preservation of natural areas and endangered species. In 1969, it was decided to have a coordinated worldwide network of national parks, biological reserves, and other protected areas under Man and Biosphere program. So such areas were occasionally referred to as Biosphere Reserve, but the real concept of Biosphere Reserve was born in 1971, and first Biosphere Reserve was identified in 1976. So here since then the number of biosphere reserves identified by MAB continued to increase, and by the end of 1986 about 261 biosphere reserves were identified in 70 countries. As the MAB defined biosphere reserves as the basic logistic resources for research where experiments can be repeated in the same places over a period of time, as areas of education and training, and as essential components of the study of many projects under the program. So it is apparent that the MAB in 1971 emphasized only two roles of the biosphere reserves. I mean that conservation and logistic roles, whereas development role was neither defined nor highlighted. So, a special task force convened jointly by the UNESCO and UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, in 1974 prepared for the first time the objectives and a set of characteristics for biosphere reserves. The major role and objective may be grouped in three categories. Which are those categories? Number one is a conservation role, number two that is a logistic role, and number third one that is a development role. So what is a conservation role? Conservation role, that is a conservation of genetic materials and natural ecosystem. Second one, that is a logistic role. Logistic role means the international network for research and monitoring. And third one, that is a development as association of environment with development. So as the following statements of UNESCO in its 1981 publication clearly reveals the goals and objectives of biosphere reserves. So here the task force proposed a simple zoning pattern for biospheric reserves in 1976, which comprised three zones. Number one is a strictly protected core area. Second, strictly delineated buffer zone. And third one, that is undelineated outer buffer zone or transition area. So the core area represents national park, which is strictly protected and no one is allowed except the officials in this area. I mean that the buffer zone is strictly demarcated but can be used for regulated non-destructive activities, whereas the transition area is not delineated and used for experimental research, and hence the traditional use and rehabilitation and other functions of the biosphere reserves. So the concept of cluster biosphere reserve was developed in 1977 during the joint USA and USSR symposium on biosphere reserve. So this idea aims at accommodating the many situations where all the functions of biosphere reserves cannot be performed in contiguous areas, where a regrouping and coordination of activities between several discrete areas is required. So this is often the case when conservation in core areas has to be associated with integrated research and manipulative experimentation in other areas.